Friday edition of PFT OT. I am flying solo. Chris Simms off on Fridays, as he usually is, recovering, I assume, from his Thursday night birthday celebration. Got some additional subjects to get to that Big Cat and I didn't address during PFT Live. One topic I want to circle back around on, though. This issue of Jerry Jones finally addressing, because the rest of us have finally noticed that he engages in the practice of dealing directly with players behind the backs of agents to try to get the players to accept the offers that the Cowboys make. And Jones was asked last night about this habit of dealing directly with players, and he denied that he negotiates with players. He merely explains to them his perspective and why he's offering what he's offering and why they should accept what he's offering, which, even though it doesn't involve the trading of proposals directly with the player, the idea that you are attempting to persuade the player to accept your offer instead of going back to the agent saying, I want more, I don't want that offer, I don't buy this idea that it's important for salary cap purposes, they don't give me, whatever the case may be. The idea that Jerry Jones is working on these players, selling these players, and he's a great salesman. The fact that he's doing it, the fact that he is going behind the back of the agent, who is the certified representative by the NFL Players Association to represent and protect and defend the interests of the player, that's a problem. And now the problem for the NFL and the NFL Players Association is this. Because they've allowed this to happen, because it's happened in plain sight for years, they make no bones about it. But now, first high-profile holdout for the Cowboys at a time when they're also trying to deal with Dak Prescott's contract. You've got Ezekiel Elliott, who isn't around. You've got some open lamenting by guys like Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones about the difficulties that arise when there's an agent involved. We've gotten to the point where enough has been said about what the Cowboys historically have done that it's reached this critical mass. So if I'm the NFL or the NFLPA, I don't just ignore this because I don't want to have to say we've been asleep at the switch for the last 30 years. They really haven't had reason to understand that this is what the Cowboys do. So they're aware of it, and they need to do something about it, because if they don't, the message to every other team, coach, GM, owner, anyone from the team side of the equation that is in a position to work on a player, the message is do it. You're allowed to do it. There's no consequence. Yeah, sure. As long as you don't trade proposals directly with the player, you're fine. You can call that player up and say, you know, boy, your agent's really just being difficult and keeps asking for more. Here's why we're offering what we're offering. I just want you to hear about this from our perspective, player, not from what the agent's not always thinking about your best interest. The agent wants to maximize his or her fee. We want to maximize our ability to win football games. The agent doesn't get 3% of your ring. But we're on the same page here, player. See, that's the kind of thing that you can do if the NFL and or the NFLPA will allow this to happen. I was told on Wednesday when this first came to light that the NFLPA is looking into it, and I'm going to continue to follow up to find out whether or not the NFLPA is going to do something about it. Because, again, if you don't, it's the Wild West when it comes to working on players directly. And the Cowboys, as Big Cat said during the show, they would love that. Because if it is fair game and everyone can do it, the Cowboys will do it better than anyone else. The Lions haven't been doing pretty much anything very well for the last 60 years. They haven't won a playoff game since 1991. But Bob Quinn, the GM of the team, says that he sees great progress in year 2 of the coach Matt Patricia regime. And the challenge in Detroit is very simple. You have a culture in the organization that has not been good for a long time. And last year was a culture shock for the players, for any member of the organization that wasn't there, or that had been there, and is now dealing with a coach who hasn't been there. And Matt Patricia brings that Bill Belichick mindset. And you know, it's not a deliberate choice. Matt Patricia was with Bill Belichick for 15 years. You see a successful coach, the best who's ever done it, and you see what he does, you bring that mindset to town. That's what you've learned. That's what you've experienced. And yeah, you want to be your own person, but who you are is shaped by what you have experienced. And you've won Super Bowl rings working with Bill Belichick. You have worked your way up the ladder doing things the way he expects them to be done. You've seen how he deals with players. You've seen how he deals with media. it's definitely going to be a shock in those organizations where things haven't been run the right way, and the results prove it. So that's really the key here. How much of that Matt Patricia culture is going to make it into the locker room? And I think the acquisition of Mike Daniels a few weeks back, where he went on the record and said, I picked Detroit because of Matt Patricia, that's the kind of thing that starts turning this in Patricia's favor. Because here's the key. The Belichick way doesn't work unless you win. Now, I know you could say that for any coach, but it especially doesn't work if you're Bill Belichick, if you are a hard-charging, demanding coach, if you are a little prickly at times with the media. Because what happens is, if you make the media's job harder, the media is going to root for you to be gone because they want somebody to be there who makes their job easier. It's that simple. So once you put the pelts on the wall, or the pellets on the horse, as Chris Simms would say, that's when you have license to be like Bill Belichick. But the challenge for these guys who leave the Belichick tree and have their own teams, win quickly. Because if you don't, they're quickly going to circle you and they're going to get you out of there because they don't like the fact that you're bringing to town a new way of doing things that is more difficult and more challenging than the way things used to be done. The Vikings have a decision to make this weekend as it relates to Corey Vedvik, the kicker that they acquired from the Ravens for a 5th-round draft pick. Vedvik 0 for 3 in field goal attempts with the Vikings. Now, he could punt, he could kick. Is he good enough to be on the roster to do either? Do they trust him enough to have either job? Are they willing to carry him on the roster, the 53-man roster, and not release him and expose him to waivers and have someone maybe claim him? A big decision for the Vikings, and they have to be willing to forget about that 5th-round pick they sent to Baltimore. You don't keep Corey Vedvik simply because you gave up a 5th-round pick to get him. Look, teams draft guys in the 5th round and cut them at the end of training camp all the time. 5th-round pick is hardly a guarantee you're going to be on the roster. But the Vikings are going to have some egg on their faces because, 5th-round pick, if you use it wisely, can end up being a great player. And it may be that they wasted a 5th-round pick on Corey Vedvik. But you can't think of it that way. If it's the right decision for the team to not keep Corey Vedvik, you don't keep Corey Vedvik. And I look at it this way. If he can't perform under the pressure of training camp in the preseason, what the hell is he going to do in the games that count? So big decision for the Vikings this weekend in an area of the roster that isn't all that critical. But when you're talking about a team that's probably going to be in some close games, field position from punts, 3 points from field goals is going to matter. And the Vikings have had a rough time in recent years with their kickers. The Texans currently having a rough time with franchise-tagged defensive end/linebacker Jadeveon Clowney. He has yet to sign his franchise tag. One thing that I take away, though, from the news that the Texans are talking to the Dolphins about a trade that would entail Clowney plus a first-round pick for Dolphins left tackle Laramie Tunsil. If the Texans can't trade this guy, if they're willing to throw a first-round pick with Clowney to get Laramie Tunsil, if they can't do a deal that would result in Clowney being traded, I do not rule out the possibility of the Texans rescinding the franchise tag. We've seen it 3 times before. 2002 with Jeremiah Trotter. It happened in June when he was with the Eagles. He promptly signed with Washington. 2005, Corey Simon with the Eagles. It happened around this time of year. He signed with the Colts and was never very good again. And then in 2016, Josh Norman had his franchise tender rescinded in April, and he promptly signed with Washington. It doesn't happen often, and it has not been a thought that the Texans were considering it. But if Clowney's not going to show up, this gives the Texans an immediate $17 million in cap space that they can carry over to next year and use on a free agent left tackle if they can't trade for Laramie Tunsil. And they move on from a guy that, by all appearances, Bill O'Brien doesn't really want. And I think the reason that they didn't work out a trade earlier, I believe Brian Gaine wanted a long-term deal for Jadeveon Clowney. Bill O'Brien didn't. The compromise was, let's give him one more year. Now that Gaine is gone, Bill O'Brien thinking about life without Jadeveon Clowney. And because of the way things went down in June, with Brian Gaine fired, Nick Caserio, they wanted to hire him. They abandoned it. There wasn't a whole lot of time between then and July 15 to do a trade to a team that would have the ability to sign Jadeveon Clowney to a long-term deal. Because I think one of the reasons why it's going to cost Clowney and a 1 to get Laramie Tunsil, the Dolphins know they're taking on a huge financial commitment for this year with no guarantee that they're going to have Jadeveon Clowney beyond 2019. So Jadeveon Clowney, look, he fired his agent Bus Cook. As of last night, NFLPA records suggested he had not yet hired a new agent. Whether this is a decision he comes up with on his own or whether someone is advising him, maybe the smart move, even if you get traded to the Dolphins, take that bird in the hand. that 16 or 17 million, because if they rescind the franchise tag, good luck getting a giant pot of money right now on the open market. All right, lastly, something I mentioned at the end of the first hour on today's PFT Live on NBC Sports Radio, not on NBCSN, but something that we need to be watching as the 2019 regular season approaches. Two elements that relate to the celebration rules. First, the competition committee made a change this year that's not in the rule book. So I was going crazy last night looking for it, and I couldn't find any news accounts that made it clear that this was something that was a done deal. But for any celebrations, only the guys in uniform can leave the bench area and rush to the end zone for the group picture, whatever they do. If you're on the inactive list, if you're one of the members of the active roster that isn't dressed that day, you can't go. If you're a coach, you can't go. If you're anybody on the sideline, you can't run down and join in the fun. It can only be the members of that 46-man game day roster. And it's important now this year to honor that, because any violation of the celebration rules that will happen after a touchdown, that 15 yards is not automatically applied to the kickoff. The receiving team, the defense, can choose to apply to the kickoff or to the try, which means if you want to kick the one-pointer, it's not a 33-yarder, it's a 48-yarder, because the snap is made now on the 30 if you're flagged for violating the rules regarding prolonged and excessive or inappropriate celebrations. And if you're going to go for two, the ball gets put on the 2, they walk off 15 yards. They probably don't actually walk off the 15. They just put it on the 17. We can add. 17-yard line, basically your 2-point conversion is a 4th and goal from the 17. So all of a sudden, getting that extra point or two becomes a big deal. And it's going to require coaches to preach extreme restraint for their players. Can you imagine a playoff game where there's a touchdown late, last play of the game, pulls the team to within 1, everybody goes nuts and runs to the end zone, and the flag is thrown? So all of a sudden it becomes a 48-yard field goal to force overtime? Actually, I kind of like that. I'm kind of rooting for that. Or you need 2 to tie the game, and it goes from a 2-pointer that's snapped on the 2 to a 2-pointer that snapped on the 17. So a couple of important wrinkles to keep in mind. Not relevant to the preseason, because who's celebrating touchdowns excessively in the preseason? But once the regular season starts, keep an eye on that. No one other than the players in uniform can celebrate in the end zone. And if there's any violation, prolonged, excessive, inappropriate moves, props like the cell phone that Michael Thomas fished out from under the padding the goalpost last year to pay homage to Joe Horn, that's going to result in a 48-yard extra point or a 17-yard 2-point conversion. That's it for this week's PFT OT. Another programming reminder, no live PFT Live on Monday. We've got Best of PFT Live, Best of Chris Simms Unbuttoned, and Peter King's Training Camp Tour. But thank me for my service now. Labor Day, I'm laboring. 3 hours of live Pro Football Talk Live, NBC Sports Radio only. It's going to be a big day as we get closer and closer to the start of the regular season. A lot will be happening this weekend. Please, on your laptop, on your tablet, on your cell phone device, ProFootballTalk.com. We will have all the transactions that are made on Saturday. It will be a crazy, hectic, fun day. And you want to know the latest about your team, about any other team, about moves you may want to make for your fantasy team, because guys are going to come available and maybe they're going to end up with new teams. There may be some trades that happen that will surprise us. Remember Sam Bradford 3 years ago to the Vikings on that Saturday morning. So around the clock, all weekend long, ProFootballTalk.com will give you everything you need to know. And we'll see you back here for another edition of PFT OT on Tuesday.